where either the audio-video dies, or I believe an RCMP representative was there to say, oh, the bad amends. And I think the head of Twitter Canada was there, and I think that's all the men that were there.
Toronto Councillor Christian Wong-Tam was there.
Yes, she was there.
And she coincidentally was in the panel for Women in Toronto Politics for their first
I know, absolutely. That's why I'm asking.
So when you see the same players show up,
I got dinner to take care. I want to hear this excellent answer.
With Occupy, I use Twitter and I use my blog to write about what's going on. I researched what's happening during the Olympics, and I found that the head of the BC Civil Liberties Association, who's now at MLA in BC, he ran this thing called the legal observers, and they're supposed to go there and make sure the police don't attack the protesters. But they were in with the anarchists, and the day that the violence happened at the Olympics in Vancouver, they took the legal observers away from the violence so they couldn't be used as evidence. And I discovered this in the middle of Occupy, that this guy who's an up-and-coming NDP leader helped the violence to happen, and so I started writing about him. And I got a warning, you don't say this about David Eby. You don't talk about David Eby, Craig. And I kept on going about David Eby, and then I proved undeniably that he was responsible for making the violence happen. And that's when my first Twitter dog pile really happened. I was already being attacked, but someone did what they did to Craig. They took a spreadsheet and they exported tweets. They got 300 of them, and it was me talking to other people, including this activist who was in this video saying the violence is good, you white pig. And she was involved in all these things. I didn't know Twitter. I just started Twitter, so I was just including her. My conversations included journalists. Roseanne Barr was involved in the conversation for a while. And I went to Roseanne Barr and I said, is it okay, because she was one of the people with Occupy in the beginning, I said, is it okay that we're having violence in Occupy? She says, no way, no way. And then they took these tweets with all these people, journalists, etc., and they only took my tweets and put them in a spreadsheet, 300 of them, and then they shared them around, and they got 85 people to sign a decree against me to say I am evil, and they published it on the internet, which it kind of destroyed my previous career, as I was a IT consultant. I was working for Accenture and Deloitte and Young, designing large-scale systems, like in the City of London, England. I designed the traffic control camera system for banks, for designing computer systems, and I lost that as soon as that happened. And I became the most hated and attacked person in BC. They tried to get the police involved, but I was careful enough. They tried to frame me as mentally ill so that they could send someone to take me in for a check.
Which is what I think. I also noticed connections in the Twitter trial. A lot of these people involved in the Guthrights, whatever you want to call them, a lot of them work for CAMH. And the benefit of them, let's say, attacking anyone and trying to get them thrown in for medical or psychological observation is it creates jobs for CAMH. The police have to take the person there, so these people are doing, they have to then arrest the person if they're considered sane or something. So then they get to go, the court handlers get to, put them through the jail system. So we're creating jail handlers, because in jail, all they do is one guy puts handcuffs on you, walks you over, sits you down, then another guy pulls up in a car, two guys put handcuffs on you, sit you down, and the paddy wagon shows up, two guys come out, they take all the handcuffs off those guys and they put their handcuffs on, and then they put you in the back of the paddy wagon. Then they take you to wherever, courthouse or back to the jail or whatever. Wherever you're going, these people, all they do is shuffle people around. And we live in a time when people can just do video. They have video, but they're not using it. Because if they use the video from the jail, they could walk around with a camera, cell number 5, they could do that. Our tax dollars could be used that way. They're not used that way because all of these public servants would be out of jobs. Our system is so inefficient and it's been designed that way.
And that leads me to the next part of my story, which was when Occupy ended, I went and infiltrated a place called Hollyhock, which is a northern island in BC. It's a new age resort, which is also the center of training for activists in Canada. So referred to the Tides Foundation in Tides Canada, they own Hollyhock. Some people put an ad in the local newspaper, and sorry, it's in the Craigslist.
So wait, this
and
is
they were
an activist?
An activist camp. Activist training camp. The activist training camp. And this also brings a lot in the U.S. It's where Occupy was actually created. But the people were volunteers there, and they're renting the house for the winter. And so I went up there. On my way up, one of the people from Occupy, it was a small island, like 400 people, and they're all hippies and they knew of each other. So they sent an email, a person sent an email to the people on the island saying, I was a dangerous mentally ill doctor. That person worked for Vancouver Coastal Health. And she used her Vancouver Coastal Health email to do this. I ended up getting an apology for Vancouver Coastal Health after that. But so I arrived on this island, and all of a sudden these people are looking at me like, oh. And I get out. I decided to come to Toronto and just get the hell out of Vancouver. And I tried to Occupy. And as soon as I got there, they knew who I was, and I was being attacked. And so I started writing about them. This is good, and exposing them. And this is where I ended up running into Greg. Is the first stage was there was a Toronto Star, ex-Toronto Star writer. We got rid of her. Antonia Zabaisis.
Yeah.
She's a horrible human being. I mean, I'm sure someone hurt her in her past, and I have empathy for her, but she's a horrible human being. In my opinion, I never heard of her before, but I was researching the G20 and the violence there. And she wrote a story about the G20, and the G20 was an inside job, you would say. There are people on the political spectrum who are involved in the G20. Shelley Carroll, the city councillor and a police board member, her hired...
Shelley Carroll was also on the panel of the original first Women in Toronto Politics meeting, so go ahead.
She hired a convicted G20 organizer who taught young people to smash Starbucks windows onto the City of Toronto payroll. So this is how deep it goes. But Antonia had written this article. I never heard of Antonia, didn't care who she was, but the article was praising this person who works for Shelley Carroll as a hero. And she wrote 2 articles praising the people who smashed up the city as victims. Now, there were a lot of victims in the G20, right? A lot of innocent people got arrested, but that wasn't when these people got arrested. These people got arrested before the violence even started because the OPP had undercover people in there and they caught them on tape saying, go smash Starbucks. And so Antonia writes a story a couple years later praising these people, and I write a story, well, I did some research on Antonia, and I saw that she wrote a story earlier about her childhood heroes were the FLQ in Quebec. And so my story was, did Antonia praise the G20 convicts out of her secret bloodlust? It was a joke. It was a question. And she got angry at me. And she tweeted live on Twitter, she said, I'm writing a story about internet stalkers. Do you want to be on it? Serious. And I was like, well, go try it. Yeah, sure. But nothing happened for a little while. Then a week later, I got an email from her asking me some very pointed questions. One of them about Harsha Walia, the woman who was promoting the violence. And I'll be honest here, I sat in my bedroom for a week crying and worried about what the fuck is going to happen to me. That the Toronto Star writer is going to pose me as a fucking demon. And then a week later, I met Kensington Market. And there's this friend of mine from Occupy Toronto named John Erb. I know John very well. John is this crazy guy, he's wonderful. But he lived in this thing called the Occupy. And it's this little house on wheels. And the best video, if you ever look at Occupy, if you ever look at Dundas Square naked man, you'll see him being pulled out of the Occupy naked by the police.
At Young and Dundas, surrounded by hundreds of people. Yeah. I built the Occupy, so you know.
And I used to hang out in the Occupy with John, and we dope and hang out, and it was good fun. And then one day I see John, and I'm talking to him in front of the Occupy, and Greg comes up.
I think you guys were inside it, and I knock on it.
Yeah,
because there's smoke coming out of it. And it's in the middle of the street in Kensington. Middle of the street, people are walking past.
Dave's not here.
Oh, and they go, who's there, right? Like, who's there? And I say, it's Greg, I built this thing. Oh, wait, we gotta come out, we gotta come out.
And Antonia had written a story by that point, about Greg. And the story, if you read it.
Arrested, that event?
Yeah, by that point you were getting arrested. Yeah. And it was right after, and her story came out. And her story matched you up with, who's the one who caused someone to commit suicide?
Usually the Toronto Star is in my opinion, a hack newspaper that is just full of hit pieces on whoever doesn't agree with them politically. they have this thing, this hit technique where like they couldn't get anything on. So the best thing they could do was write about horrible people on the internet, and then sneak my name in there and more horrible people. You know, so
It was
just by
horrible.
association.
And so when I met Greg, I was like, oh, you made the Occupy. Wow, that's cool. Oh, and you're the person that got attacked. And at the same time, I'm like,
Which is always good.
this is
approach with caution. Right?
horrible woman abuser. And even when the trial started, I was very interested because if Antonia had not threatened to put me in that article, I probably wouldn't have cared so much, but kind of got to my heart. So I went to Greg's trial, and second day I sat there and I saw the police officer who charged him say Greg didn't make any threats, and he said nothing sexual. And at that point I went, wow, what's wrong here? The Toronto Star says he's a monster. The Crown is prosecuting for a crime and taking away his right to use the internet. And I dug deep in and I realized that this is horrible. What was done to Greg that was done in Canada. I lived in East Europe for 7 years and I knew people who were journalists. I knew a guy who was a journalist who wrote the wrong thing and he would have the same kind of stuff happen to him right after they put electrodes on his private parts.
They actually do it to a lot more people in Canada. We don't hear about it because they get media blackouts, or the person commits suicide beforehand, you know, or because they ruin lives. And regardless of who is attacking, whether it's some author that's writing about an investigative piece on Toronto Police Services or Toronto Police Unions or whatever, like I've seen more than enough examples of people just saying, look at what's over here, and then all of a sudden their life goes to shit, you know? And it happens in Canada. And then you guys wouldn't even know anything about me if they got the media blackout, you know? And so this is why you, as reporters... They tried.
But it was too late because Guthrie had already gone to his biases on the Toronto Star and she got these articles on and she went on the video somewhere.
Right after my arrest, she had all of her friends in the media, all admitted friends, that actually said right in the third paragraph, you know, full disclosure, I'm good friends with Guthrie. And like, wow, like people are reading that and ignoring that part, like, you know. But yeah, it's insane. They do it all in the open, and because we're busy watching sports or playing video games or you know, or watching American politics, which was really fun.
Good. Speaking as an American, I mean, I know Canadians as a general rule, and I'm not singling anybody out here. You guys don't seem to know a whole lot about America, but the things I hear from you guys, this is horrifying because we have nothing like this.
We followed the election really closely in America.
Yeah, Trump.
Everything's going, WikiLeaks says, everything's happening in Canada is happening there.
Yeah, but we don't
happening in universities.
We don't get people arrested.
In the universities.
Well, no, because you have freedom of speech. You know,
I know, but I'm saying it's American. This is utterly horrifying.
They're trying to take that away.
They try, but it hasn't quite gotten anywhere yet.
Actually, they
Shaming and the silencing is happening in the universities. And give it
I
5-10 years, those kids in universities will be the adults in business and industry.
I agree.
and they'll be in politics. A lot of the kids in university now that they're indoctrinated, that they've indoctrinated since grade school.
I
Think about it.
I'm just stunned that it's happening.
A huge part of the problem here is that we're small.
Yeah.
Second largest country in the world with the smallest population. And so you look at the media, they don't just all know each other, they all go to school with each other. And they all talk to the
parents
very
went to school together.
level of politicians. And even if they're not connected or working together intentionally, they have to see each other the next day. Right? If you're a journalist in America, you can work with Breitbart and you can go wild. And people won't know who you are the next day when you walk in a restaurant. If you're doing that in Toronto, all of a sudden you get excluded and pushed out and it's over.
Or someone spits in your food. Could be worse.
So it's very incestuous here.
I'm a second year Ryerson student.
Sorry.
So believe it or not, in our class we ended up getting a forced lecture from the human rights officer, which was it was Inquisition class to say the least. But no, it was bad. I would go through.
Great tell.
No, I can't. It's so long. And basically, we had a guy who said the fact that people ask about your accent doesn't matter because you're a white guy from the UK. I'm not joking. It's sad. And anyway, so my roommate used to be in journalism. Used to.
The day schools are bad, yes.
And I'm an RTA, so we have a big rivalry going on. And I see the amount of bias that is covered in both the Ryerson and the Iowa, which is the student journalism papers.
Yeah, I got a dirty trick played on me by the Iowa after I was assaulted by an anarchist once. They pumped me for information.
Well, there's two articles that they put out recently. One is I'm part of the Esports Association at Ryerson, and they made a completely gender-biased article on one of our managers. It was like they wanted to talk about our League of Legends team, and then they ended up making an article about how there's sexism and misogyny in gaming, and how this woman is a glass breaker, etc. Blah blah blah, and she didn't want that. And then they also recently made an article that I'm really sad about because it was to a man that I very much admire, and that's a social work director at Ryerson. And the Iowa Opener made an article basically saying how the Black Liberation Collective at Ryerson is asking for, I think Henry Parada is his name, to step down because in a meeting, a person of color went out to go speak and he left the room later finding out to go use the bathroom.
You may not know this, but Ryerson is one of the most powerful social justice universities in the world.
And I knew that.
and
I
York
knew that
University.
because
York University
Dan,
is really
where's Dan?
But Ryerson in particular.
Dan, you probably know this, but so on about 2 or 3 separate occasions now, they've discriminated against MRA groups. I'm not an MRA, but
That's good.
but Dan would probably know it. So they've moved, like forcibly moved MRA groups to another building, to the Victoria building, in smaller rooms. They
Kind of petty, isn't it?
yeah, they've denied.
Don't give them big rooms.
Yeah, they
Every day's a big room for
another
them.
one. They raised the security fee to like thousands of dollars. And then they also, most recently, the one I actually signed up for just to see how it would go, they denied club membership altogether. So they had to use alternative routes to actually do meetings. And now that MRA group, I don't know if it's still going on, but they're actually going to be suing the RSU.
And they will lose because the RSU is a private corporation.
The RSU, yep. Yeah.
I just about Ryerson. Ryerson is where kind of Occupy started. It started in Hollyhock and Ryerson. Ryerson is the home of the CAW Sam Gindin Chair of Social Justice, of which it used to be led by names.
Don't look at me.
Judy-
I've been watching York
Judy
University here.
Oh, Judy Rebick is like the #1 old world feminist in Canada. And she helped.
Rebel.ca fame.
Yeah, she stole Morgenthaler's fight and called it her own, and she was one of the people who architected Occupy. She was one of the people who architected the Occupy movie, Occupy Love, in which I have video of Judy Rebick saying that she was at Hollyhock where I was. We were coming up to the plan. So that's one side of it. And you also have the current chair of the CAW Sam Gindin chair, who is Woody Inc. The CAW is the Canadian Audio Workers, which is the most outrageously wild and radical union.
Well, I don't know, the teachers' union's pretty nasty too.
Yeah, well, here's nasty. You want to hear nasty?
Bad.
When I was in Occupy Vancouver, we had this man come to us named Kevin Annett. I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy. Kevin Annett he's the only person ever to be defrocked by the United Church. Because he was at a small school in Vancouver Island where he was an asshole, pardon my language, and they tried to take care of him, and he made up this story about residential schools. He latched onto the residential school story, and he said there are 50,000 dead children buried across the country, that the church has murdered and killed in child rituals, child sacrifice rituals. You laugh about this, but he came to Occupy Vancouver and he said, let's go all occupy the church. And I was lucky enough, I rallied people away from this. I'm like, if you want to occupy, let's bring them together. Supposed to get the 99% to come in and be sitting in their church on a Sunday. You're not going to make any friends. You got rid of him. I got to Toronto and I found that he came here right afterwards. And he went to the Six Nations Reserve in Brantford, Ontario, where we also had QP 3902 and 3903. if you're familiar with them, they're radical student.
Canadian Union.
Canadian Union Public Employees, but they're, the 3902 and 3903 are for teaching assistants at University of Toronto and York. And they had the CFW, where they've been back there since the days of Caledonia. Are you all familiar with Caledonia?
Yes.
In Caledonia, a bunch of anarchists from unions linked up with some
I don't know
First Nations people from the community. The majority of that community are good people. The majority of that community are not violent, but they started violence in the streets of Caledonia, took over the city for months. The Ontario Provincial Police were so afraid, politically correct, of going against the First Nations that they allowed them to block roads so that residents couldn't get home. In the end, a resident of the city was knocked on the head and ended up with permanent brain damage. And that's when things kind of came together. A judge just recently attacked the OPP for not doing anything. But in the same community, Kevin Annett went there with people from Occupy Toronto. And he said, the residential school here, the Mohawk school that was in the community, has a mass grave of residential school children. And he was backed by the CAW, and he was backed by QP. And they went and did this dig, and he took out animal bones and spread them out and said, look, bones of children. He came to Occupy Toronto, and he stood up and he said, look, I have the bones of children sacrificed by priests. Winnie Ing was one of his top supporters, the head of the Ryerson CAW Social Justice Chair. Because they sent this guy in to radicalize and to get people angry, and what's the better way to get power in a First Nations reserve than to tell them, I know about your murdered children, and here are the bones. In the end, I worked with APTN and we debunked it and they got him thrown out. But if you want to know what's nasty and the ugliness that comes out of Ryerson, well, Ryerson made a hoax about a fake mass grave.
Well, I mean, I guess
That's
that's not surprising because they tend to make the fact that, Ryerson is the architects of the residential school system. So, probably
All I've got on York University is Anita Sarkeesian there, so we got a contact with her.
went to Fanshawe. My buddy goes to Fanshawe.
Who did?
Lacey Green.
I'm shaking right now.
She's Canadian.
She's Canadian.
So,
Strong in this country. I don't know what's
it was so funny. He's a lot more centrist like me, maybe a little more right. He went to one of the speeches. Yeah, I was surprised she gets but it was all about feminism and sex.
And the next day, it's like I never said. It's crazy. It's
But
when we come in,
like,
so crazy. All right, then I miss it.
I'm in an RTA New Media, which before used to be in the military, and New Media is very much technology. I'm sure it's a fine. It's art, but every, I think, class, my theory that every program has some sort of history of history course. This semester I have technology, identity, and creativity. It's 10 or 11 weeks we have that class, but 8 of them are on identity classes. And it really, like, it's way
Themselves, they might begin to want to hustle and step.
and then,
It's easy when you're worn out. They can indoctrinate you easier.
yeah, I know. This was only about 2 weeks ago that the human rights officer put himself in.
Why'd you just assume
I think his name's Connor Bowman, but I can't remember for sure.
It's probably damage control from Jordan B. Peterson's
Oh, yeah.
trouble that he's created at U of T, right? So the universities are scrambling to head it off with the past, lest it spread like a virus.
Yeah.
Sensibility and
My friend, his mother works at U of T, and she likes Jordan Peterson, really.
He's a good guy.
And so he actually asked the guy, "What do you think of Jordan B. Peterson?" He was like,
Well, the thing is when you get into that discussion, like, it just gets very negative. But let's just say, I don't like the guy.
So that's his narrative, right?
Well,
Jordan B.
yeah.
Peterson is negative.